And I would like a chance at the end just to let people know where they can reach me.
We're going to
Yes,
do
that's
that.
Okay, which I always forget.
Yeah, we always do that. That's important.
About to go live. This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the rant with one of my favorite people, Barbara Rose Brooker. And if you don't know who Barbara is, well, let me tell you something. She is an author. She's written 13 novels, and you better read them because I'm going to tell you, you are going to feel so good when you read her books. She is an activist, and her biggest activity right now is on ageism. And today, Barbara, I understand you have two great guests who are going to help us with this age old problem called ageism. You ready, Barbara?
Oh, yes, I'm ready. And listeners, you are in for such a treat today. We are going to be talking about ableism and ageism with two people who are not only experts in with these issues, but they're people who are working hard to make a difference in this world where we define people by age and disabilities. And they are just fabulous. I'm going to start, I might have to put on my glasses because I wrote down some things and I do not want to forget one thing. I'll start with Peter Slatin. Peter, welcome. It is an honor to have you. Peter is a pioneer and advocate for disability rights. Peter, who is blind, founded Slayton. Do I say Slayton Companies or Slayton?
Slayton Group. It's a Slayton Group.
Yes.
It's a group.
What's so amazing about Slayton Group, when I've been reading, is that he educates and he works with businesses and hotels and other venues, and he educates and trains through workshops how to fulfill the special needs of people who have disabilities. For example, traveling. And that's all, I'm only touching the tip of the iceberg. He's also a writer, journalist. He writes for Barron's, he writes for Forbes, and many other. I could take up a lot of time citing his many accomplishments. So I'm just going to start there because I'm introducing our next guest, who is Ashton Applewhite. And a lot of you I know who Ashton is. Ashton is the voice, I say. Ashton is a voice for positive aging. She is the author of many books, but her last book, This Chair Rocks, is acclaimed. It's acclaimed. I love that book. We all love that book. It's a national New York Times bestseller. Ashton has been named as one of the 40 most important women today. She is doing incredible work. Ashton also says, I love one of your quotes, ageism is dangerous. And that really struck me. As an 83-year-old woman who I do believe that age, I should say, is treated as a disability, as an impairment that needs to be fixed. And I experience this often. And just yesterday, after Biden's wonderful talk, a reporter attacked him for his age. I think he's 79, I'm not sure, and accused him of having cognitive disability. I want to ask, there's much more I could say about Ashton, but I don't want to take up all the time citing the accomplishments. You're going to have to, listeners, we'll tell you later where to find Peter and Ashton. But I want to ask the question that interests me. I want to know how ageism and ableism intersect. I also want to know for our listeners what ableism is, how you would describe it, and how the two enforce each other, how they intersect, and how is your work, how are you working to change?
One question at a time, please.
Right. But I want to say one more thing. You two are working to change age attitudes and attitudes towards ageism and disabilities, and that's very important. So who wants to go first with the ableism question? Peter, do you want to go
Well,
first?
since I have the putative disability of blindness, I'll go first. And I think I can start out with the idea that if I reference something you said, which is age is thought of as a disability, an impairment to be cured. And the truth is that disability is, of course, everyone thinks, oh, everyone wants to cure what you have. Let's take care of what you have. Let's cure it. When it's really, for many of us, I'm not going to say for all of us because it's different for everybody. It's just who we are. It's where we are in our lives. It's a progression of development, of learning. And I learned as I grew into my progressive blindness and began to meet people in the blindness world, and people I met were many people who focused all their time on finding a cure. And these were usually parents of someone who was blind. And they were just racked with guilt for having born a child with a disability, and they were tortured themselves, and frankly, they tortured their child. And basically the idea is, well, you are broken until we find a cure, we must focus everything on finding a cure. And I found that the solution to me was, I know they're not going to find a cure in my lifetime, and waiting for it is useless. It's a waste of my time and energy and thought. And I'd rather learn how to function at my best in a world that's not designed for me. So that's a long way around the answer. Ageism is, about how everyone wants to cure age, as if, we've discovered fountain of youth or whatever. And it's just not there. Instead of finding out how do we live our best lives as we age. And I'm young here. I'm 65, so I'm just this
Baby.
in the room.
Newsflash, you are not young.
You're both babies.
Thank you.
We are not babies, and we are
No,
not
we're not.
young. If
And
there is
I'm
more
enjoying
road
not being
behind
young.
us, exactly, we're enjoying not being young. I mean, I love that introduction. Part of my goal was to say everything first before Peter got to it, so I'd leave him at a loss for words. So I'm a little upset, but I'm going to work through that.
You can take it, Ashton. I know.
If you could substitute age for much of what Peter just said, learning, because age is perceived, as you said, often in an ageist society, not in indigenous cultures, not in,
Right.
there are cultures where there are exceptions. This stuff is socially constructed, which is a fancy way of saying we make it up. The way we think about it. We don't make up arthritis. We don't make up blindness, but we make up our attitudes about them,
That's
right?
so good. Yes.
So when, so learning to be who we are, because I'm 68 as of 2 days ago.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. That I am who I am because of my years, not despite them. I just want to define ageism and ableism because I think that's useful, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how they intersect, and then I'll shut up, I promise. The dictionary definition of ageism is stereotyping and discrimination on the basis of age. The dictionary definition of ableism, sometimes called disableism, is stereotyping and prejudice on the basis of ability, whether physical or cognitive. And it's a vast range of conditions, just as age, we all age in different ways, right? Peter, the last time I spoke with him, he said something, poetic, really. He said, I'm not blind the way anyone else is blind. I'm not 68 the way anyone else is 68. You're not 84. We all do this in our own way and at our own time. But
you said that.
And no judgment, however someone wants to do it. If we each have to find our own way and not be judgy, because that doesn't help anyone. But what the disability justice people, I'll start the big idea again, which is that a tremendous amount of our fear about getting older is rooted in fear of physical and cognitive loss. And those losses are real. I'm not going to wish them away. I have a little problem with the term positive aging, because I think there's a lot of brushing the scary stuff under the rug as though it doesn't exist. It does exist. We need to acknowledge it and acknowledge that you can age positively regardless of how well your body works, your brain works, your face looks, right? But imagine what would we be left with in ageism if we stripped away that fear, part of which is human, again, but a lot of which is socially constructed. We stigmatize it. We think, oh, I may be old, but at least I'm not crippled. I may be crippled, but at least I'm not old. All that does is pit us against each other and dig the damn hole deeper. So that's why Peter and I are collaborating. How can we learn from each other, about how we've adapted respectively to age and disability? Peter's got both, ha 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 ha. But I'm disabled too. I lost, I have really bad arthritis. I lost the hearing in my left ear last year to a brain tumor, and I caught myself thinking, well, at least it's sexy brain tumor, benign, I'm fine. But at least it's sexy brain tumor deafness, not unsexy old person deafness, which makes me both ageist and ableist, right? We are all prejudiced, and where we all need to start is in our own internalized attitudes between our ears to how we feel about being older and having bodies and brain that don't work the way they used to.
So you're working, both of you. So people do not define people by their age, because age is not a one size fits all. I have one eye that barely works, diverticulitis, arthritis, cancer survivor, and a few other things, and I'm going to be 84. Now, some people would say, and a lot of people say, especially when I try to pitch and do things, oh my God, throw her over the edge. So you both are working to change the attitude. So I want to ask you, Ashton and Peter, what do you think about legislating some of the labels and terms that segregate us, like disability? Can't it be something else? Positive ability, pro-ability, disability. I personally do not like to be called elder. I'm a person, I'm not an elder. And I feel that I am segregated in healthcare, in work, in everything. I mean, I don't allow it, but it's there. How do you feel, Ashton and Peter, about your work, about promoting legislation for some of the anti-disability, anti-age labels?
Ashton,
I'll give a quick answer and turn it over to Peter. People's attitudes shape legislation. First, you change the culture, and the legislation follows, not the other way around. Peter.
I have to say, not much to add to that. I think it's once you try and legislate that, when I talk about disability in the Americans with Disabilities Act, that has cured, or its goal, it's going to be 30 years old later this month, on my daughter's birthday, I should say. It was designed so that we could remove these barriers to physical entrance. That was what was considered initially. People getting into and out of places and around spaces. then along comes the web, and now we have digital accessibility. And you can legislate about digital accessibility, and there have been thousands of legal cases about digital and physical accessibility. To me, the true holy grail is social accessibility, social access, but you cannot legislate that, just like you cannot legislate a label. So, you know, so many people want to find a different word than disability, but I think at this point it's rooted, it's taken root. And when someone says special needs, or people say differently abled, or words like that, you know, just take it in. If you have a disability, you have a disability. And the definition of that, according to the ADA, is if you have a condition that inhibits the performance of a major life activity. And I'd say ableism is if you believe that someone's inability to perform a major life activity makes them less than you, that's basically ableism.
Right. And I mean, that's the definition of racism too. I mean, Black Lives Matter is active now. And I think we need to say that the most important thing we can do as advocates for age equity or ability equity is to support the movement for racial equity, because it lifts all the boats. But, you know, race is real. No one is colorblind. You are racist when you ascribe a hierarchy to races. You are ableist when you say that people who have no, you know, perfect function in every regard are somehow better than or superior to the rest of us.
But you know, Ashton, you said the magic word, which is fear, or it's the magic word, which is fear, and you know, fear of aging, fear of disability, and you know, the funny thing about aging is, what's the only thing worse than getting old? Is not getting old, you know. Well, so, and that's
I used to say that, right? Except that really says that the only thing worse than being old is being dead. So yes. I stopped saying, you know, I mean, I say, you know, you have a more lovely informal way of describing ableism. I say we're being ageist anytime we make an assumption about someone or a group of people. And it could even be positive. Oh, she's old, she's so wise. Some old people are idiots. They haven't learned a thing. Even a positive stereotype is a stereotype. Peter brought up wheelchairs, and that reminded me of a really important analogy. The people who got the ADA passed, the wonderful activists, changed the way we see disability from a personal problem, poor, pitiful you in a wheelchair, to a social problem that we could come together and do something about. That's what consciousness raising did around having a vagina in the 1970s. The vagina isn't a problem. Sexism is the problem, right? And one of the ways it was praised beautifully and succinctly was, the problem is not that I'm in a wheelchair. The problem is that there are stairs between me and where I want to go. We can legislate the stairs, and we see, thanks to the ADA, that there are a lot more ramps than they used to be, not anywhere near enough. What can we do now is speak out. Think about the fact that people with disabilities have been asking for decades for accommodation so that they could work from home. And so that if you have a hearing impairment or a visual impairment, the technology could be made accessible. We know how to do this. Suddenly, the minute the health of the rest of the population was at stake, all these things became magically doable. Call that shit out. Right? That's not okay. Make sure that the changes that I think these changes are going to be, many of them permanent, to the way we travel and the way we work, and to remote learning, remote speaking, all this stuff. Those should not be rolled back once, God willing, the virus has receded. You know, so we need to, just as we need to fight for access and equity for people of color, we need to, first and foremost, race is more important, especially right now, and because of the way it is embedded in the culture. So I'm not making an equivalency. But when we work towards equal rights for Black and brown people, we also work towards a better world in which to be female, in which to be old, in which to have a disability.
Yes, yes.
It's not zero sum, it's the opposite.
But
Yes, exactly. So it adds, we bring, when someone hires someone, when a person with a disability is hired, they bring a perspective that just isn't available to anyone else. They bring
Absolutely.
experiences that no one else in that office or venue has, and it's really valuable.
It's shocking how many products for people with disabilities, they don't have designers with disabilities consulted on them. I think that's nutty, right?
How many products were actually created to help someone with a disability that turned into general use products, like the typewriter, for example. And I can't remember the story about that, but there used to be this thing called a typewriter. But it was invented by someone who wanted to give their child assistance in writing.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Ashton, I have a question for you.
It's amazing, but I just want to say one thing before it floats off my brain. When Ashton used the word old, for example, I want to ask how you both feel about the media who 24 hours a day and on the internet presents people who are over, I'll say 50 up. How they're presented, I think, in a very, very plastic, ridiculous way. And that age is equated with appearance so much in our culture. I'm sick of hearing, oh my God, you don't want those jowls, you don't want those sags, you don't want your disability, you don't want this and that. I usually flip the station now, and I wear turtlenecks a lot anyway to hide the jowls, who cares? But I'm not against products, but I am against the message, the anti-message, and you've talked about that, I know, Ashton.
Yeah, it's biased. I mean, I saw a great paper, which I retweeted yesterday. It's like, you never hear Anthony Fauci described as active or spry or, an active senior, because he is in the world in all these ways that we don't think anything about when a younger person does them, but that seem like, oh, amazing for an older person. So no, it's not okay. And what we can do about that is to speak out. Social media obviously is super useful, but there's nothing wrong with a letter to the editor. They work. Talk to your friends about it. Call up, make noise. So let's lose the elderly. Ugh.
Well, what do you
old should not be a dirty word, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like the 75-year-old man who was pushed by the police, who fell, and now he has a permanent brain injury. They refer to him not as a peaceful protester, not as a fit man, whatever, as an elderly person, like he shouldn't have even been walking or there.
Well, on the other hand, they also do call him an activist, and he's from my hometown, and Buffalo has a radical tradition, and he was an activist, so they did give him that label, and he wasn't active against ageism, but just against all forms of inequity, and that was his standard. He was bearing that standard.
Yes, it was.
But as to I want to comment on your media thought, Barbara. Yes, everyone on television looks plastic. I don't care how old they are.
True. Yeah.
It's generally designed so that the plastic look is the look we want. Where that comes from, I'm really not sure. But it comes from the idea that everyone should look, whatever age they are, it should be a perfect exemplar of that age and style, that way of being. But of course, only many more men are allowed to be on air who are older and are given the gravitas of an older eminence grise, a commentator, a Daniel Shore type, or if someone might remember Andy Rooney.
Loved Annie.
But younger people, and especially younger women or older women, are not, they really have to fight for airtime. And it terrifies I think it terrifies men more than women to see an older woman, because older women often have that that very same gravitas and experience that that they can talk about with ease, like Ashton can and like you can. And one hates to be an older man shown the way of the world by a woman, you know, just can't
And
stand.
God forbid she should be sexual, a sexual older
Yes,
working
well,
woman.
that's-
That's really a taboo and scary.
Oh my God. And the way women who are older are presented on the media. How about that ad that's on all the time where the woman, the woman found her keys in the laundry. The husband found the wife's keys in the laundry, and he's going, and she's kind of looking all sheepish and everything. And then suddenly the ad comes up for some kind of new brain senility medication. I mean, I found my toaster in the fridge, and I don't think it's because of my age. I just have a lot on my mind. In other words, this is
It might be. I mean, that's the thing. We have to acknowledge that stuff doesn't work as well as it used to. I mean,
Right.
when you were saying you broke your glasses, one of the subheads in my book is, okay, I have a whole chapter on the older brain and both the real scary stuff and all the positive changes that aging confers. I mean, there's this thing called the U curve of happiness, which shows that people are happiest in the beginning and the ends of their brain. And that is because of the way aging affects the healthy brain. We have a positivity bias, we get better at rolling with the punches, and we think we may take longer to come up with the name of something because there's more data in here to sift
There's a lot
through.
more.
But I also,
we
I
aren't
do.
so concerned with, as we're older, we're not, and our children move out of the house and get on their own, and we're not so concerned with some aspects of daily living as we used to be. Now,
But I do forget where I left my damn glasses, and I didn't when I
Yes.
was 40, and that's real.
well, I don't have to use my glasses anymore, so I still do. I used to have them and forget where they were.
You
Now,
did when you were 40?
I'm
See,
sorry?
well, I was just saying, Ashton said it's age. Well, what you're saying is acknowledge that these things happen, but
No shame.
No
That's the
shame.
thing.
The age shame is just terrible. I mean, I don't know whether it's because I'm 84 and that I lose my remote and keys and all that stuff. But I never think, oh my God, I'm almost 84, so I lost my keys. I just lost them. Whereas other people will say to me, well, you know what happens.
That's very
the
true.
party's
Very
over.
true, Rose.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something important about shame, and that is that I learned, as Ashton said, I believe we all have our own disability, our own age. We own it the way we have it. And as someone who went blind, who slowly went blind, who has slowly gone blind through the course of my life, that I carried a particular shame that I had when I first started using a white cane and, became noticeably blind. I thought that was unique to my particular condition. Well, I learned that young children who are in their 5, they're 7, whatever, if they have to start using a cane at that early age, they feel great shame when they're out in the world as well. And so where does that shame come from? We're not born with it. We learn it from somewhere, whether it's from our parents or our school
Cartoons,
friends.
children's books.
We learn it. We don't have shame. We're not born with shame. We're born happy to be naked.
No, those attitudes start to form in early childhood, towards age, towards race, towards ability. And we live in a society where what the wonderful poet and activist Audre Lorde called the mythical norm, which means, for the most part, thin, white, male, cisgender, right, heterosexual, and financially well off, and typically in this country Christian. So the further you, and did I say,
and of course, able-bodied,
non-disabled, right? Sorry. And so if you diverge from that, it is seen as a source of shame and failure, especially in the United States, which is a hyper consumer-oriented culture and a hyper capitalist culture. If all these things can be seen as problems, we can be persuaded to buy stuff to stop them or fix them. One huge reason aging, these natural transitions, are so medicalized is because pharmaceutical companies make billions of dollars off it. The reason we're brainwashed to think our wrinkles are ugly is because of the cosmetics industry profits from this hugely. If we all accepted it and put that money and energy elsewhere, a lot of people would stop making so much money off us.
Yes.
Well, the reason our home care industry is so, our senior care industry, I should say, senior homes are so big, such a huge industry in this country, is that we have learned, you know, from our early age that that's where we want to take our old people. You know, we don't want to share our homes with our elder parents.
It's in the culture.
And there's
It's
been
in
a
the
huge
culture.
push in the disability rights movement for the right of people with disabilities to stay in communities. And we see
Yes.
a huge push among we spoiled boomers, which I'm dead center. You know, to not want to be, you know, shuffle off to some really yucky institution and to stay in
Yep.
our homes, which I will say, make myself unpopular again, but say that that is fantastic as long as aging in place means aging in community. The most important component of a good old age is not how healthy you are, which I would have thought starting into this, or how wealthy you are, although money makes lots of things easier. And let's not forget the class bias of that whole medicalization and beautification message. All that stuff costs money. The most important component of a good old age is a solid social network, and staying in the home, in the burbs or the country where you raised your kids is often a recipe for the opposite. So, and it's also sometimes really a lot about denial. Is that home and that community where you want to be when the driveway fills with snow, the gutter fills with leaves, and no one is available to come, you know, check in with you and help you out with the stuff we're all going to need help
This
with.
is another area where the, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, this is another area where the pandemic, the COVID-19 has
Yes.
really equalized the playing field in the sense that older people and people with disabilities often are in isolation because people stay away from them, or for people with disabilities, they can't, it's dangerous to leave the home because, as I said, the world is not necessarily designed for us. And for older people, people stay away from them. And now with enforced isolation and the inability of being visited where you are, if someone can't get there, suddenly the whole world has discovered what it's like to have lots of time on your hand, to be alone, and to realize, hey, it's not so bad.
Yeah,
you know?
we have a lot to learn from people with disabilities of all ages who have adapted, been forced to adapt to this, you know, for often for their whole lives, depending on the nature of their disability and when they acquired it. So again, the speaking of the intersection, you know, I think there's so much, you know, we're all ageist, we're all ableist, and it's a big ask to say, look at your fears and think about where they, not only, I will always say these fears are real. They're nothing to laugh at or brush under the rug, but they are so far out of proportion to the reality, right? And let's look and see at how people who have faced similar challenges, how have they adapted? And how can we learn from them? And why do we just assume that their quality of life is so horrible? Because it's brainwashed. We're brainwashed from birth by that mythical norm as the right way, the best way, the only way, when there is no one way, right way, or best way.
I have a question for you, Ashton. And that is, you know, in the disability community, we're often confronted with kind of supercharged role models, you know, the blind man who climbed Everest, or the blind man who sailed across the ocean. And, you know, these are amazing feats, but, you know, I think it's amazing when I walk around the block and make my way through Times Square and transfer on the subway or just get on the subway. You know,
Making your way through Times Square is a feat for any human.
For anybody.
I salute you. Yeah, I mean, I read about disability when I was preparing for my book. I'm learning a lot more now because, it had a dawn on me, I am
Yep.
not, since I do not have disability in the way the world tends to see the term, I need to obviously listen to people who do, but it's called the super crip, right, Peter? I mean,
Right.
again, the crippled person, crippled in air quotes, who does something totally normal, but is seen as, like, go for a walk or whatever, and is held up as this amazing, this inspirational person. Inspiration porn is
Oh
another
God,
phrase.
we call it inspiration porn. Yes.
Yeah, and you see that a lot around oldness, the 80-something-year-old who climbs Mount Everest or who jumps out of an airplane. And these people they do inspire people. They are role models, but it's really, really important to keep in mind that they are outliers, that they have the time and the resources to be able to afford to hire an airplane or get to Mount Everest,
Right.
first of all, and that I don't want to jump out of an airplane, and I sure as shit don't want to climb
Thank
out
you.
Mount Everest, even if I were physically capable of doing it. I mean, I wouldn't have the point, there is no right way. And it's, I think I've finally broken my friends of the habit of sending me videos of, Peruvian women jumping rope at 40,000 feet or
Oh
whatever.
my God. So
But,
funny.
it's not because I'm not interested in promoting these exceptional people, because the media does it for me. They love these outliers.
Right, right.
And part of it is for the legitimate reason. It's look, not all age, oldness involves disability, which is a useful message to get out there. But all of us are going to or already have aged into some reduced function, even if it's just that you can't run up the stairs or lift something heavy, right? Or remember the name of the movie you saw with what's her name, and to pretend that we can be that, as long as the goal is to continue to look and move like younger versions of ourselves, we are falling into an expensive and futile trap that pits us against each other. The goal should be to be healthy, to try and do versions of the things we've always loved that are important to us, but not to stay young, to stay healthy and active as best we can.
What you're
But Ashton, I wanted to
Karen had something to say, I think.
Barbara, you're talking about, you use the word overcome, and when a blind person climbs Everest, are they overcoming their blindness? No, they're overcoming Everest. And when
Well said.
we do our normal daily tasks as older people or blind people or people with disabilities doing normal things, what we're overcoming is not age or disability. We are overcoming society's low expectations.
Here, here.
Or they had a dream. Or they had a dream always to do it. What's wrong with that? I mean, I'm 83. I want to be a movie star. I'm pursuing all kinds of things. I'm not stopping to think, oh my God, I'm 83, so I'm not going to do it. Now, how it's received is a whole nother issue.
That's another issue, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Karen, you were going to say something.
Yes, Karen.
One of the things, Ashton, that you talked about, I think is really important, is that as we get older, as we go from age 10 to 20, we do things differently. From 20 to 30, we do things differently. So why isn't it okay from 50 to 60 and 60 to 70 and onward to do things differently? And we should embrace that. We're living our lives.
Yeah,
So-
well, not only, I mean, if I could put one fact into, like, somehow, drill it into the skull of every human being in the world to end ageism, it would be the fact that the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. Every newborn is unique, but 20-year-olds are a lot more alike physically, socially, cognitively, developmentally than 40-year-olds, who are way more homogenous than 60-year-olds, and so on. And yet we tend to think of everyone over a certain, people always want to know where that magic point is. I think you put it at 50. Barbara, I say if there's more road behind you than ahead, pretty obviously. Maybe, which is probably 50, that then we become lumped into old, the elderly, when in fact we become more and more and more diverse. The reason for that is, of course, ageism. We live in a society that paints age as something negative, even though we look around us and we see with our own eyes and ears, that's probably an ableist way to put it. We encounter, all these examples of people in the world in all kinds of different fascinating, wonderful ways, despite having all sorts of hurdles, financial, physical, social, you name it. So it's up to all of us to challenge that idea that there's a best way to be, and that we are failures.
I think the best way
from it
is what you said is very important. And also, both of you, all of you, I want to know, how do you think, and do you think that all ages, because of our era of technology, where we're all learning, whether we're 90 or 100 or 20, because in my writing workshops that I teach, and people are 50 up, I have a man 96 in my classes. He's Zooming, he's doing things, he's learning things. Do you think that all ages eventually, maybe in the next generation, from the work you're doing, can merge and there won't be that segregation, that age segregation?
I think that's, again, about so much about attitude, and it takes, I think that's a wonderful goal. But at the same time, we want to celebrate what Ashton was just talking about, the heterogeneity of what happens as we age. And so
I agree.
I no longer, I don't want to be a 20-year-old.
Right. I know. I always ask people, like, do you actually want to be younger? And their faces brighten. Youth and age are different, and it's important. It's why I don't like the phrase age is just a number. It's not just a number that we can wish away. It's an integral, valuable part of who we are, and it's a valuable data point. On the other hand, what does that number say about you? Not very much. And the older you are, the less it says.
Well,
and these expectations come from demographics that have been, you were talking about our capitalist society, our consumer society, reflects advertiser demographics of the 18 to or 20 to 54-year-old, or 18 to 34, or 34 to 56, or whatever. I don't really know them, but we are supposed to behave within certain parameters when we're in those particular numbered parameters.
And then the charts tend to end at 65, as though everyone over 65 buys the same stuff and does the same things, when which is just absurd, especially when you consider the spending power of people over 50, which is vastly greater. So sometimes I scratch my head over the fact that ageism trumps even the bottom line in advertising. They don't even try and sell us stuff. And there's also internalized prejudice. A lot of people, we don't want to use that wheelchair because it makes us look disabled.
That's back to the shame paradigm.
Back to shame, rampant, right? Women don't want to shop at sites for older women. Although, what does that even mean? The word that you buy frumpy stuff? No, but because we're reluctant to identify as older. So we always have to look at our own role in this.
You said something which I totally agree with, and say myself, I'm age inappropriate. What is this term, age appropriate? Which means you're supposed to look a certain way and act a certain way because of your age. I guess I'm speaking to Peter and Karen from a sociological point of view in future generations. I'm not saying I want to be younger. I love being my age. I really do. And I feel sad for the women who want to mutilate themselves to be younger. That's
well, I think we are moving in the right direction, Barbara. And when I speak to groups at a business, and I talk about the changes that have been wrought by the Americans with Disabilities Act, I say this is younger colleagues are part of the first generations born after the advent of the ADA, which means they're the first generation born into legal protections for people with disabilities, where they didn't get a memo at birth saying, please stay at home, or not, it's just stay at home, you belong there. And so that's now part of their mindset. And they look at race and gender and sexual orientation and disability in the same non-binary way
Yes, good point.
that we struggle with and we're taught to struggle with, and we're
Yeah.
made to
Binaries,
struggle with.
binaries are not our friend. That was one of those sort of big
No.
aha moments ages ago. It's like people are like, when does old begin? We don't move from old to young. We don't move from mobile to immobile, from independent to dependent. I would like to strike the word independent from this entire discourse around age and ability. Everyone needs help with tons of things all life long. And typically, as you know, we need I think obviously we need the most when we're babies, and then we need the most as when we're parents of young children, if you happen to be parents, but that's when I really could have used 8 extra arms.
That's when you need your older mother or father to help you.
Right, or a lot of money to pay for, and then we need it more as we age, and that's just a fact, right? But we don't, there's all this stuff about independent living and active seniors. Well, what if you're not active? What if you need help? That doesn't make you lesser. And we're back to shame again, to take,
That's beautiful. Yeah.
To take the shame and the stigma out of it. I mean, I've heard doctors bang their head against the desk because they have a certain, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so who's in their, it doesn't even matter how old they are, but they need to use a walker in order to be safe, or they should take that seat on the bus in order to be careful. And they won't do it because of this terrible internalized idea that if they do, they will be ashamed and they will seem less. Someone offers me a seat on the bus, I'm like, heck yes, thank you so much. But I had to
Me
work
too.
to get there.
I think what you just said is the most important for all age and ageism is the shaming. The shaming the sociologically, the shaming. So I want to know how you two are plotting or planning to promote these ideas and concepts about a generation accepting and changing ideas, not only about ourselves and how we age and our image of ourselves, but sociologically, what are you planning next?
May
Or
I?
how are you going to change?
Go ahead, Peter.
Sure. Well, it's of course in how I behave every day, but in my work, whether I'm writing a column for Forbes.com or out doing my training and education program in hospitality industry or in a business environment of any kind, it's really about saying, let's throw away that perspective of, well, are you really able to do that? Can you do that? Wouldn't that get in the way? Are you sure you can, climb the stairs? Are you sure you can turn on a computer or be independent, basically? And so it's always just to get the message out, change your mindset, think differently, stop thinking about disability and age as something that gets in our way. These are tools of thinking, of perspective that we can use, that we can harness. And what's to stop us? Yes, there are barriers that society erects. There are barriers we come up as we age that are real, but it's acknowledging them and learning workarounds. How do and if I find a workaround, how can I show that to my colleagues that makes them perform better themselves? So it's really not just by example, but by explaining that these are things that people need to know and understand, and reminding them of a history of a time when people with disabilities really could not leave their homes. And then they start to realize just how many people they've seen out in the world in a wheelchair, with a walker, with a cane, with a hearing aid, and that these people are functioning and high functioning. And it's a new way of thinking for people who have been spending their whole lives thinking another way, thinking in a negative way and in a shaming way and just afraid.
So important. And not saying, oh, good for you, that you're out in your wheelchair, because I have friends who are in wheelchairs, have MS, and my friend said she doesn't want anyone to stop her and say, good for you. It's like, good for you for being 83 and you're still working.
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing.
I
like-
mean, you know, I'm writing like Peter. I used to spend a lot of my time in airplanes going to give talks in far-flung places, and that now seems as arcane as if I used to, you know, walk behind a mule with a plow. So, like so many people in this post-pandemic world, I do have to reinvent how I get my message across. And I think between the pandemic, which has exposed the ageism and ableism around us. Don't worry about this
Yes.
bug. It's just going to kill old crippled people, right?
right.
And then along, so that it became clear that I really had to include ableism more in my messaging. And then along came Black Lives Matter, which made it obvious. I mean, I've always known, but I haven't been as active as I should have and could be around promoting racial equity as part of it. So, you know, I'm busy thinking really hard about, it's a time of turmoil and transition for me. And I don't know how long it's going to, you know, it's not, again, it's not binary. I'm not going to get to some point where I figure out what to say, because I'm going to keep learning and I'm going to make mistakes.
Ashton, you're right in the heart of the world that's in transition. You're finding your transition and guiding it and using these guideposts from racial equity. And
yeah, I mean, it's scary. It's very unnerving. I wake up in the mornings, some mornings, and I'm often, you know, feel hugely daunted is my word. I whine to my partner. This morning I feel daunted. These seem like high challenges, and I'm not sure I'm up to it. And then I chip away at it a little bit, and you know, it's a task that we can only embark on with others. But the very first starting point is between your ears. I want to plug a site called oldschool.info, which is a clearinghouse of free, vetted, anti-ageism resources where you can
it's
find
amazing.
oh, thank you, Peter. You can find all sorts of stuff. Everything on it is free except the books. One of the things on it is a free download called Who Me, Ageist? How to Start a Consciousness Raising Guide Around Age Bias. Consciousness raising is the tool that catalyzed the women's movement, because women came together and shared stories and realized that what they had been seeing as personal failures, again, a source of shame or inadequacy or not being more like men, were in fact widely shared social problems that we could come together and do something about. So I know someone who's working on a guide that addresses the intersection of ageism and racism. I'm going to be working with the Jana Davis Institute on a guide that addresses the intersection of ageism and sexism. Download that guide and start a group. Start it with your best friends. Ideally, involve young people as well as older people. Ideally, involve Black people as well as white people. Ideally, involve people, you know, with disabilities in addition to non-disabled people. The more mixy-uppy your group is, the more we will learn from each other about how to support each other in what is fundamentally all one struggle.
It's a movement. It's a movement.
Yes. It's many movements. It's many movements.
But in that old school, I think it's wonderful. And the Black Lives Movement is really teaching us so much, much. And this is a time for inner reflection. And
it's teaching us as long as we're open to learning. And I think
and to acknowledging
what
our
happened
own
with
ignorance.
George Floyd opened a lot of eyes that
really and the white privilege that exists, and that so many white people don't even want to acknowledge. I mean, that's a whole nother show. I mean, our president won't even say Black Lives Matter, but don't get me started on that.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there.
Barbara, we're coming down to the end of the show. And before we do that, if Ashton and Peter can, you know, sum up, you know, in a sentence or two, I know that's going to be difficult, you know, how you feel, and also let us know how people can reach out to you.
I think I just did in that statement about it all being one struggle. You know, start at whatever scale makes sense to you, which is, you know, just think about how you use the words old and young. Think about whether you use ableist metaphors. I used to say such and such was lame all the time because I liked it.
Yes.
Well, I've broken that habit, which is hard. So, you know, start between your ears. I have a book which is fun to read, believe it or not, even though it's a manifesto. My website is thischairrocks.com, and I have been thinking out loud for 15 years. So everything on there is free. I have a newsletter just up today. I don't write them very often about the intersection of Black Lives Matter and our role in that. Another blog I have is called Yo, Is This Ageist? Which I modeled on this spectacular Yo, Is This Racist blog, because we have a hard time talking about race and we don't often recognize ageism because it's a new idea. Peter, maybe you should start Yo, Is This Ableist? I believe it's available. So you can send in something you have seen or heard or perhaps done. You know, the hardest part is to acknowledge our own bias, because we can't confront bias unless we're aware of it, and we are all biased. So that's how to
what
find
are
it.
our
It's easy to find.
It's fabulous, Ashton.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Peter?
I'm just really pleased to be here, Barbara. I'm glad you invited us. I think
What an honor for me. Thank you, Peter and Ashton. I really mean it from my heart.
I'll say that if people want to reach me, I am at www.slaytongroup.com, and it's SLATIN group, or peter@slaytongroup.com. And basically I go to whoever wants me to come and help them learn to make life easy for people with disabilities. Not easy in the sense of cushy, just less annoying. I say I just demystify disability, because disability is a terrifying thing to many people, and it's something we just want to shy away from. I say, get comfortable with it. Be aware that it's not something to be afraid of. It's part of our lives. It's the way we live.
All of our lives.
Yes.
And
Much better listening to you both. Thank you so much for that demystifying. It's so important.
You're very welcome.
thank you.
Did you want to say something else? Are you there?
Who, me?
Yes. Oh,
You're me. I think.
Who, me, ageist?
Well,
okay.
I want to thank all of you. Barbara, I want to thank you for starting AgeMarch.
Here.
And this year we will be doing a virtual AgeMarch, and we hope the two of you will join us because we need people like you to help demystify some of the information that's out there. And I will tell you, I'm 70 years old and proud of it. And I don't do things like I did 10 years ago. And I probably am not going to do things as well in 10 years. But you know what? That's okay. And I really learned that today from all of you. So thank you very much. And we'll have to have you back on soon.
Yes, thank you. And you can find me, barbararosebrooker.com. It's easy.
Thank you.
I'm easy.
Very.
Thank you all so much.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Barbara.
Virtual
Thank
hug.
you, Ashton and Karen.
Bye-bye.